Hello, hi, and welcome. If you are new here, my name is Sarah, and this is Wicked Reading. So today is going to be a little different. I have my microphone out, so hopefully the sound is good. I've used it once before, so I'm still kind of getting used to it. The reason I have it pulled specifically for this video is I'm going to be looking down a lot and reading. So I wanted to make sure that the sound is okay since I'm not going to be facing the camera as often as I typically do. And I did notice that this room has been, I don't know why, but this room's gotten very echoey, I feel like, and I don't know if it bothers anybody else, but it kind of bothers me. So maybe this will do better with the echoing and relieve some of that. I'm going to be looking down at my laptop because I have a bunch of notes, because today we're going to do a very different video than I usually do on this channel, and I'm going to share with you guys 13 books that are new horror releases coming out in the first quarter of 2024. So this will cover books from January to March. I didn't include every single book. I decided not to talk about books that have a lot of coverage already. I feel like people already know that they're releasing. I wanted to find a few more books that were self-published or indie, just some other books that I feel like haven't been marketed towards me as much compared to some of the other ones. That being said, there's a few on here that are very much probably heavily marketed towards you if you're into horror. I did only include books that I have an inkling of interest in. I have to be at least slightly interested in it. That being said, I don't necessarily plan to read most of these books. There's a couple that we'll talk about that I'm definitely going to try to get my hands on and read. Most of these books, I'm just kind of hoping that somebody else reads it and tells me how it is and lets me know if it's worth my time. But I wanted to share some with you guys so I can put them on your radar, so maybe you can tell me if it's worth reading or not. So I think that covers everything that I needed to address immediately, so let's talk about the books. I will go in order of how they're being released. So the very first book that I have on my list is actually releasing January 1st, and it is called Bruises on a Butterfly by Chad Lutzke. The synopsis for this book says, a young boy runs away from his abusive home to live in a fort he'd built with friends, smack dab in the middle of Michigan cornfield. But when a cosmic discovery one night warps reality into a mutating nightmare, it's up to loyal friends to fix what they can and bury what they can't. A dark coming-of-age tale that fuses Color Out of Space with Stand By Me. So I've never read from this author. This is a very small published book. Right now, as far as I can tell, you can only pre-order it through Cemetery Dance Publications, which is the company that is publishing this book. That is currently the only place I see it on. I don't see it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, any of the big box stores. I don't see it available at. But I did think that it sounded really interesting, and I am willing to try more cosmic. If you watched any of my vlogs or wrap-ups where Edenville was included, you would know that I didn't have the best time with that one, but that's also cosmic. But I thought that this one sounded interesting. I liked the premise of it. But I will say that it looks like the author's other works are very much thriller and suspense. So this might be more of a light horror, but I still thought it sounded interesting, so I wanted to include it on this list. So this next one comes out January 16th. This is one that I absolutely am going to try to read. I will probably see if my library gets it, or I might just buy it. It sounds really cool to me. I love the premise. So the book is This Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer. It is being published by Quark Books, and it is listed as a supernatural survival horror. And one of my goals for 2024 is to read more survival horror because I think it will truly terrify me. I just haven't read that much. Let me read the synopsis. It says, 4 ambitious climbers hike into the Kentucky wilderness. 7 months later, 3 mangled bodies are discovered. Were their deaths simple accidents or the result of something more sinister? This nail-biting, bone-chilling survival horror is inspired by the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident and is perfect for fans of Alma Katsu and Showtime's Yellow Jackets. Now, I have not read from Alma Katsu, but I have heard very good things, and I have not watched Yellow Jackets, but I've heard very good things, so it's promising enough. Now, it really interests me that this is inspired by the Dyatlov Pass incident because I have watched a lot of like podcasts and YouTube videos about this incident. It is just like so interesting to me. It's so mysterious. And I think creating a horror novel based on that is just like such a great idea. So I'm really excited. This is the author's debut novel as well, so that's pretty exciting for them. And Rachel Harrison did blurb it, and I just wanted to read it because it just makes me even that more excited. She said, with nimble pacing, scream-worthy scares, and ever-present sense of dread, a trip to this wretched valley is one you'll never forget. So this one is actually like an anticipated one for me. On January 30th, we have Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona. This is listed as a suspense horror, so it may end up being a little bit more kind of thriller feeling. I feel like anytime there's like suspense in there, it just ends up kind of being thriller. But the cover to this is absolutely stunning. I love the blue and the pink together, and the premise is really interesting as well. So it says, October 1993, one night, one house, one dead body. When single mom Eleanor Mizinski goes out for a much-needed date night, she leaves her 2 young children, sweet, innocent 6-year-old Ben and precocious, deviant 12-year-old Myra, in the capable hands of their sitter Amy. The quiet 17-year-old is good at looking after children despite her anxiety disorder. She also loves movies, especially horror flicks. Amy likes their predictability. It calms the panic that threatens to overwhelm her. The evening starts out normally enough with games, pizza, and dancing, but as darkness falls, events in this quaint suburban New Jersey house take a terrifying turn. Unexpected visitors at the door, mysterious phone calls, and by midnight, little Ben is in the kitchen standing in a pool of blood with a dead body at his feet. It says, in this dazzling debut novel, so this is another debut novel, Emily Ruth Verona moves back and forth in time, ratcheting up suspense and tension on every page. Chock full of nods to classic horror films of the 70s and 80s, Midnight on Beacon Street is a gripping thriller. Okay, it says thriller there now. Full of electrifying twists and a heartwarming tale of fear and devotion that explores our terrors and the lengths we'll go to keep our loved ones safe. Moving back and forth in time, I like that. I like stories that do that. It creates a lot of dimension for me. It creates a dynamic reading experience that I enjoy. But yeah, it did end up saying thriller, so I won't be surprised if this turns a little bit more thriller-y, a little bit more like mystery maybe. But I like that it has nods to classic horror films. I love that stuff. So this is going to be one that I'm going to very closely watch for other people's thoughts on. I might not immediately go for it, but we'll see. And I'm definitely going to look out for reviews. So that's all the ones that I picked out for January. So moving into February. So this first one, I'm not totally sure when it's going to be published. I think February 1st, but maybe not, but definitely in February at least. But this book is actually going to be self-published, so I think that you will have to get it directly from the author, and that is Always in This Nightmare by J.E. Erickson. We don't have a specific cover, but we do have like this image attached to it. I don't know if that will be kind of the background image and they'll have the cover and the font and stuff over it or what, but that's all we have right now. This author does have a lot of other self-published works and a few other releases planned for 2024, so look out for them if they sound interesting. They write all in the horror category from YA to extreme, so if you're into horror, they seem to have horror at every level, so I'm really interested to check this out. This might be one that I do purchase myself. It is listed as a horror romance, which piques my interest so much. So the synopsis for this book says, one night, the improbable happens. Ella is thrust into a romantic affair with her sleep paralysis demon, Mara, through whom she discovers an intoxicating source of power in a world not meant for her. A world of living nightmares who feast upon the fears of sleeping humans. Torn between these two worlds, Ella wrestles with her desire for a normal life, uncovering a strength she can have all to herself, and an impossible relationship with a woman who has haunted her for her entire adult life. When danger slips past the nightmares and into our world, Ella discovers whether Mara truly loves her or if she's just another monster using Ella for her fear. So this just sounds so interesting. And horror romance, I don't feel like there's a specific book that really says and really stands out as a horror romance. So I'm really just interested to read this and see what kind of balance becomes of that with like a horror story and a romance, because I've tried to look into horror romance, but I tend to just kind of get results of dark romance, romance with dark themes, maybe some paranormal romance where it's just kind of like a vampire's involved or something like that, but it's not really like horrific beyond like the horrors of toxic relationships in a way. So I'm curious to see what would become of this. It does sound like it might be a little bit of a toxic relationship, but what stands out to me is that there's this world of living nightmares who feast upon the fears of sleeping humans. So maybe we get like a whole underworld kind of thing, a different dimension world thing going on. I don't know. It definitely piques my interest. I'm not saying that I'm running to read that as soon as it releases, but it definitely has my attention, I'll say that. There's also a traditionally published book planned for February 1st, and that is We Ate the Dark by Mallory Pearson. This is described as a gothic queer horror with thriller and mystery elements. So the premise says 5 years after Sophia Lyon disappeared, her remains are found stuffed into a hollow of a tree bursting through the floorboards of an abandoned house in the woods. The women who loved her flock home to North Carolina hills to face their grief. Frankie, Sophia's twin, is in furious mourning. Poppy is heartbroken. Cass has never felt more homesick. And Mara knows something the rest of them don't. Determined to find Sophia's murderer, they share more than a need to see justice done for their friend. Each woman is haunted, bound to the next by something both cruel and kind, and now stalked by a shadow presence they've yet to understand. As Sophia's secrets unravel, so do those of the woods, and the women soon realize that Sophia might not be who they thought she was at all, and that whoever or whatever killed her is coming after them. The premise of that doesn't necessarily stand out to me very much, to be totally honest. Murder and like mystery doesn't pique my interest. Now, what does pique my interest was the blurb about the author, because I think that maybe while like the plot itself is kind of whatever, maybe the character work will be very good. I don't know. It says Mallory Pearson is a writer and artist portraying themes of folklore, queer identity, loss, and the interaction of these elements with the southern United States. That makes me more interested. I like folklore. I like grief horror, identity stuff. I like that makes me way more interested in the book than the actual premise for the book itself. So this probably won't be one that I pick up, but I do hope that one of you guys read it and can let me know how it is. Don't mind this little squirrely tail here. Winnie decided to join us, so she's going to be in and out, I'm sure. Then on February 6th, we have Your Shadow Half Remains by Sunny Moraine. This one is a more like well-marketed one. I've seen it a few places, so you might know about this one, but it is listed as a post-apocalyptic horror, which interests me. I will say the premise, I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. It totally gives Bird Box and A Quiet Place. It like gives those vibes, which I liked both of those, but I don't know if I need another one. But Nat Cassidy did blurb it, so that makes me a little bit more interested in it. But anyways, let me read you guys the premise. It says, The Last of Us meets Bird Box in Sunny Moraine's Your Shadow Half Remains, a post-apocalyptic tale of where eye contact causes people to spiral into a deadly violent rage. One look can kill. Riley has not seen a single human face in longer than she can reckon. No faces, no eyes. Not if you want to survive. But when a new neighbor moves in down the road, Riley's overwhelming need for human contact makes her throw caution to the wind. Somehow, in this world where other people can mean a gruesome, bloody death, Ellis makes her feel safe. As they grow closer, Riley's grip on reality begins to slip, and she can no longer fight her deepest desires. All Riley wants to do is look. The little part that says Riley's grip on reality begins to slip, that does make me a little bit more interested in this. The whole kind of background of the story, I don't know how I feel. This is definitely one I will look out for reviews for and kind of base if I'm going to try it out or not on what those reviews end up being. But Nat Cassidy did blurb it, and I do love his books. And it says, gorgeously written and impossible to put down. Alongside the mounting dread, Moraine evokes a loneliness and an aching for simple human connection that's so palpable you can't not recognize it as your own. Another one for February 6th is Among the Living by Tim Lebbon. The synopsis says, estranged friends Dean and Bethan? That's a weird name. It's like Ethan, but with a B at the beginning. Bethan. I read further, and it sounds like Bethan is a girl, so maybe it's Bethan, like Beth, but just Anne at the end. Okay, let me restart because that threw me off. Estranged friends Dean and Bethan meet after 5 years apart when they are drawn to a network of caves on a remote Arctic island. Bethan and her friends are environmental activists determined to protect the land, but Dean's group's exploitation of the rare earth minerals deep in the caves unleashes an horrific contagion that has rested, frozen, and undisturbed for many millennia. Fleeing the terrors emerging from the caves, Dean and Bethan and their rival teams undertake a perilous journey on foot across an unpredictable and volatile landscape. The ex-friends must learn to work together again if they're to survive, and more importantly, stop the horror from spreading to the wider world. So it says it is a propulsive horror thriller, fast-moving, frightening, and shockingly relevant. This adventure will grip you until the final terrifying page. So this is another one that's kind of like survival horror, survivor thriller maybe. It does sound really interesting. It might be one that I eventually try. This might be one that I read at the end of 2024 for like the winter time because it is in like the Arctic, and yeah, I'm not gonna read it probably when it comes out, but maybe it'll end up on my winter TBR next year. We'll see. Then on February 13th, I'm sure you guys have heard about this one, but I want to talk about it too anyways, and that is An Education in Malice by S.T Gibson. Now, I wasn't going to include any sequels on this list. I should have said that in the beginning. I am specifically not including any sequels on this list, but technically this is a sequel. But upon reading it, I think that it involves different characters completely. So I think it's just kind of like, you know, in a series, but like different people. I think I actually haven't read the first Dowry of Blood yet. I have it right here. And it's going to be on my 24 books I need to read in 2024 because I've had it forever. I think I'm going to love it, but I just keep putting it off. But anyway, so I haven't even read the first one, but this one also sounds good, and maybe I can get it and it can sit and collect dust on my shelf with Dowry of Blood. But this is described as a sapphic vampire fantasy horror historical novel. It says, deep in the forgotten hills of Massachusetts stands St. Perpetua's College. Isolated and ancient, it is not a place for timid girls. Here, secrets are currency, ambition is lifeblood, and strange ceremonies welcome students into the fold. On her first day of class, Lauren Sheridan is thrust into an intense academic rivalry with the beautiful and enigmatic Carmilla. Together, they are drawn into the confidence of their demanding poetry professor, De La Fontaine, who holds her own dark obsession with Carmilla. But as their rivalry blossoms into something far more delicious, Laura must confront her own strange hungers. Tangled in a sinister game of politics, bloodthirsty professors and dark magic, Laura and Carmilla must decide how much they are willing to sacrifice in their ruthless pursuit of knowledge. This is probably the lightest horror on this book. I think what is deemed horror is just the fact that there's vampires in it, which kind of happens a lot. So I don't think it's going to be very horrific, but it sounds very academia, sapphic, rivalry, so like enemies to like lovers kind of thing, with like some dark gray area stuff going on with this professor. It sounds really good, so I hope that it is. I think maybe I'll at least make a deal with myself that I can't buy it until I read the first one. So You heard it here first. I'm making that deal. If you see me buying it before I read Dowry of Blood, yell at me. Another book we have for February 13th is I Can See Your Lies by Izzy Lee. This is one that I am really excited about. I think you can only buy it through the publisher because it's not showing up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but this cover, stunning. This cover is beautiful, and I usually don't like people on my covers. I usually don't like faces on covers, but this cover's doing it for me. I definitely might buy this one. So the synopsis says, Finn's reality is crumbling. Her husband has abandoned her. She's now a single mom to a 9-year-old daughter. Her Los Angeles home is sweltering, and she's being haunted by disturbing hallucinations that make life a waking nightmare. Are the visions a product of stress, trauma, psychosis, or something else? The answers to those questions become more clear when Finn starts digging up dark secrets connected to her mother's cold case disappearance, a once rising actress who mysteriously vanished in 1979. Will Finn slowly unravel the truth, or will it remain hidden forever beneath the glitz and glamour of illusion? Now, I know I just said that like murder mystery doesn't really interest me, and I stand by that. So like that's not what interests me about this book. That is the one thing about this book that makes me nervous. But what interests me about this book is the disturbing hallucinations. I don't know if it's going to be kind of like unhinged woman territory, how that's going to feel, if it's going to be female rage. I don't know, but I am intrigued. So this might be one I have to try out because I don't see many people talking about it, so I don't think that there's going to be many reviews for me to rely on, so I might have to just bite the bullet and buy this one myself and see. I'm interested, but I don't want to get my hopes too high because, again, with that cold case disappearance stuff, it might just end up leaning way more into murder mystery than I want it to, but we'll see. Then on February 20th, we have The Bad Ones by Melissa Elbert. This is described as a folklore / fairy tale fantasy horror. It says it is a supernatural horror novel about 4 mysterious disappearances in a town haunted by a sinister magical history. In the course of a single winter's night, 4 people vanish without a trace across a small town. Nora's estranged best friend, Becca, is one of the lost. As Nora tries to untangle the truth of Becca's disappearance, she discovers a darkness in her town's past, as well as a string of coded messages Becca left for her to unravel. These clues lead Nora to a piece of local lore, a legendary goddess of forgotten origins who played a role in Nora and Becca's own childhood games. An arresting crossover horror fantasy threaded with dark magic, The Bad Ones is a poison pen love letter to semi-toxic best friendship, the occult power of childhood play and artistic creation, and the razor-thin line between make-believe and belief. So again, it has like this murder mystery, disappearance mystery aspect to it, but the whole idea of this local lore is what really interests me with this. The fact that it says it's like a crossover horror fantasy interests me. This one I'm not going to go out of my way to get, but I do hope somebody else reads it and lets me know how it is. So that's everything I have for February. Again, not everything that's being released in February, but all the ones that stood out to me that I could find. And moving into March. The very first book I have for March is released on March 5th, and it is called The Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendoyln Kiste. I have only read one book by this author. I think it's her only other book so far, and that was Reluctant Immortals, which I really enjoyed. I had a fun time with, but it's definitely not for everybody, but I liked it enough where I'm very much excited to try out another work by her. So this is described as a gothic feminist horror, which really interests me. But again, we have a mystery thing going on. So it says, the Velkwood vicinity is the topic of occult theorists, tabloid one-hour documentaries, and even some pseudoscientific investigations as the block of homes disappeared behind a near impenetrable veil that only 3 survivors could enter. Only one has in the past 20 years until now. Talitha Velkwood has avoided anything to do with tragedy that took her mother and her 8-year-old sister. drifting from one job to another, never settling anywhere or with anyone, feeling as trapped by her past as if she were still there in the small town she so desperately wanted to escape from. When a new researcher tracks her down and offers to pay her to come back to enter the vicinity, Talitha claims that she's just doing it for the money. So this is described as a suburban ghost story about a small town that trapped 3 young women who must confront the past if they're going to have a future. So I'm like mostly interested in this because it's listed as like a gothic feminist horror, and because I've read from Gwendoyln Kiste prior, and she definitely had a lot of feminist takes and feminist like underlying themes throughout Reluctant Immortals that I really enjoyed. I really liked it. I will say the premise is a little confusing. I don't totally understand what I'm going into this book with, but that's okay. This is one that I will probably try to get at least at my library, see if I like it, and if I do, then I'll buy it, but I don't feel super confident that I'll love this one, but I am intrigued. So I am going to give it a go eventually. This next one, you guys probably have seen a little bit more often. I've seen it marketed quite a few times now. The cover is beautiful. I love the cover. I'm really interested in this one. This one comes out March 5th, and it is called Thirst by Marina Yuszczuk. Ooh, I don't know how to say his last name.
Y hoy voy a entrevistar a Marina Yuszczuk.
Yuszczuk? I'm sorry. I tried. This is a supernatural horror, but it is listed as literary, so be aware of that. And it is LGBTQIA+. So it says, across 2 different time periods, 2 women confront fear, loneliness, morality, and a haunting yearning that will not let them rest. A breakout genre-blurring novel. It is the twilight of Europe's bloody bacchanals of murder and feasting without end. In the 19th century, a vampire arrives from Europe to the coast of Buenos Aires, and for the second time in her life, watches as villages transform into a cosmopolitan city, one that will soon be ravaged by yellow fever. She must adapt, intermingle with humans, and be discreet. In present-day Buenos Aires, a woman finds herself at an impasse as she grapples with her mother's terminal illness and her relationship with motherhood. When she first encounters the vampire in a cemetery, something ignites within the 2 women, and they cross a threshold from which there's no turning back. It says, Thirst plays with the boundaries of genre while exploring the limits of female agency, the consuming power of desire, and the fragile vitality of even the most immortal of creatures. So this sounds really interesting to me, but this I feel like is definitely going to be very literary. Definitely going to be not so in your face horror. Again, it might just be horror because of the vampires, but I'm still interested either way. It sounds like it might have some pretty good feminist conversations there too, with like motherhood, dealing with her mother's terminal illness. This one sounds up my alley. And then the very last book that I have to tell you guys about releases on March 19th, and it is called The Woods All Black by Lee Mandelo. It says The Woods All Black is equal parts historical horror, trans romance, and blood-soaked revenge, all set in 1920s Appalachia. Leslie Bruin is assigned to the backwoods township of Spar Creek by the Frontier Nursing Service under its usual vaccinate the flock, birth babies, and weather the judgments of churchy locals who look at him and see a failed woman. Forged in the fires of the Western Front and reborn in the cafes of Paris, Leslie believes he can handle whatever's thrown at him, but Spar Creek holds a darkness beyond his nightmares. Something ugly festers within the local congregation, and its malice has focused on a young person they insist is an unruly tomboy who must be brought to heel. Violence is bubbling when Leslie arrives, ready to spill over, and he'll have to act fast if he intends to be of use. But the hills enfolding Spar Creek have a mind of their own, and the woods are haunted in ways Leslie does not understand. The Woods All Black is a story of passion, prejudice, and power, an Appalachian period piece that explores reproductive justice and bodily autonomy, the terrors of small-town religiosity, and the necessity necessity of fighting tooth and claw to live as you truly are. This one sounds really good. This is probably going to be one that I just purchased. I haven't seen this one marketed much at all, so I don't know if it's going to be one that like my library acquires. This sounds like one that just I'm gonna like. Historical horror, the trans romance, in the Appalachia. It sounds really good. It might be another one that's a little bit more literary, but I feel like this one is going to have maybe some good body horror. I'm basing that on nearly nothing, but I don't know. I get the vibe from this book that it's going to deliver a little bit more on the horror end. I don't feel like too many books on this list are strictly horror. A lot of these seem to merge a lot of different genres. I'm definitely going to look out for reviews of these books. I will definitely be reading some of these books myself. Let me know in the comments down below what books stand out to you. If there's some other books that are being released that I didn't talk about that you want to share, please let me know. But that is going to be everything for today's video. If you haven't yet, please give the video a like, subscribe for future content, turn on the bell notification, all the fun YouTube things that help your girl out, and I will catch you guys in the next video.